I crawled to the bathroom on my hands and knees after he left, looked in the mirror, and couldn't recognize my own face.
My name is Yoon Ah Kim. I'm 27 now. I was in escort work for a little over 3 years before I finally left it behind. Before any of that started, my days looked pretty ordinary. I'd get up early in our small apartment in Seoul, make coffee that was always a little too weak, and try not to wake my younger brother. He was still in high school then. I'd leave him a note sometimes if I had an early shift, just something dumb like, eat the leftover rice, or don't forget your jacket. The commute to the salon was the same every morning. Crowded subway, people staring at their phones, me standing near the door so I could get off fast. I worked as an assistant at a mid-range beauty place. Nothing fancy. I mixed masks, cleaned tools, held the mirror while the senior stylists did their thing. I liked the quiet parts of the job, the way the light hit the mirrors in the afternoon, how some clients would talk about their kids or their jobs while I washed their hair. It felt steady. On my breaks, I'd sit in the back room and sketch. Just little drawings of eye shapes or color combinations I wanted to try someday. I kept a cheap notebook in my bag for that. At 18, I had this clear picture in my head. Finish the advanced courses, save enough, open a tiny space of my own. Not a big chain, just a quiet room where people could come in, sit down, and leave feeling a little better. I used to walk past empty storefronts on my way home and imagine the sign. Nothing dramatic, just something simple with my name on it. Evenings were usually the same. I'd pick up a second shift sometimes, just basic cleaning or helping at another shop nearby, then come home and help with dinner. My mother worked late at the supermarket. She'd walk in tired, kick off her shoes, and ask if my brother had eaten. We didn't talk a lot about money, but you could feel it in the air. The way she'd count the bills twice before putting them away. The way she'd go quiet when certain phone calls came. I tried not to push. I just kept taking the extra hours when I could. My brother never asked questions. He'd just sit at the table doing homework while I cut vegetables. Sometimes he'd show me a drawing he did in class, and I'd pretend it was better than mine. Those were the easy nights. I still had friends from school back then, but we didn't hang out as much anymore. Everyone was busy. On Sundays, I'd take the long way home just to look at the flowers outside the small shops. I liked the smell of the street food in the evening. I liked knowing my brother was safe at home. I liked thinking that if I kept working steady, things would slowly get better. The apartment wasn't much, but it was ours. The walls were thin and the water heater took forever, but it felt like enough. I used to fall asleep listening to the traffic outside and telling myself that this was just the beginning. That if I stayed careful and kept my head down, I'd get to that little beauty space someday. I really believed that. The money stuff started getting harder in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on at first. One month, the electricity bill was higher than usual. The next month, the landlord mentioned something about the deposit we'd never fully paid off. My mother would come home later and later, and some nights she'd just sit at the kitchen table with the same papers spread out, not saying much. I'd ask if everything was okay, and she'd say yes, just tired, but the quiet felt heavier. I picked up more evening shifts. Nothing major, just cleaning up after closing or helping with inventory at another place a few stops away. I'd get home after 10, sometimes close to midnight, and my brother would already be asleep. The apartment felt emptier then. I'd heat up whatever was left and eat standing at the counter so I wouldn't make noise. My hands hurt from the chemicals at the salon. My back ached from standing all day. I'd tell myself it was temporary. Then the calls started coming more often. My mother would step into the hallway or go outside when the phone rang. I never asked who it was. I just noticed how her shoulders changed when she came back in. One night, she and I got into it over something small. I think it was groceries or the fact that I hadn't done the laundry. It turned into her saying I didn't understand how tight things were, and me saying I was already working 2 jobs. We both stopped talking after that. My brother stayed in his room the whole time. I stopped sketching as much. The notebook stayed in my bag for weeks. The advanced course I'd been saving for kept getting pushed back because every extra one seemed to disappear into something else. School fees for my brother, medicine when my mother got sick, a sudden repair on the old water heater. I'd look at the empty storefronts on my way home and feel this dull disappointment, like the picture I'd carried for so long was fading a little each month. I was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. Some mornings, I'd stand in the subway and just stare at the floor, counting how many more hours until I could sit down again. I kept telling myself we were managing, that if I just kept going, it would even out. But the pressure didn't even out. It just settled in quieter and quieter until ordinary days started feeling heavier than they should. I kept looking for regular ways out first. More hours at the salon, a third place that needed someone for late cleaning. I even asked about factory shifts on the edge of the city, the kind that start at 5 in the morning. Nothing stuck long enough to cover what was coming due. My mother stopped hiding the papers as carefully. One night, I saw the numbers. Private loans, interest that didn't make sense. She just looked at me and said we'd figure it out, the way she always did. I tried talking to a couple of old classmates about better jobs. One of them worked in a hotel. Another was doing sales. They were polite, but nothing opened up. I thought about pausing everything and just focusing on any steady paycheck, even if it meant giving up the courses for good. That idea sat in my chest like a stone. I delayed. I told myself next month would be different. I counted the small amounts I still had saved and pretended they were enough. Then, a girl I knew from the evening shifts mentioned something casually. She said there was work that paid a lot more for just going to dinners. Nothing more than that, she claimed. Sitting with men who wanted company, conversation, someone presentable. The money she talked about was 3 or 4 times what I made in a full day of salon work. I laughed it off the first time, said it wasn't for me. Felt a flush of shame just hearing it. I went home and scrubbed the kitchen harder than it needed. But the calls kept coming to the apartment. My mother's face got thinner. My brother asked once why she was always on the phone in the hallway. I didn't have an answer. I started calculating in my head at night how much the interest was eating, how little my regular pay was moving the needle. Pride kept telling me there had to be another way. Fear kept showing me what happened if there wasn't. Hope kept whispering that maybe it really was only dinners, temporary, just enough to ease the worst of it. I sat on it for days, avoided the girl when I saw her, tried one more round of extra shifts that left me so tired I almost fell asleep on the subway. Nothing changed. The pressure didn't lift. One afternoon, she texted again. Simple, no pressure. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, yes. The girl from the evening shifts met me outside a convenience store near Gangnam. She handed me a small envelope with an address and a time written on it. Said the client was already waiting, just a dinner, nothing complicated. I took a taxi because the subway would have made me late. The driver didn't talk. I watched the lights outside and kept checking the time on my phone. The place was a mid-level hotel restaurant, the kind with soft lighting and dark wood tables, not flashy. A hostess in a black dress led me to a private corner booth. The man was already sitting there. Mid-40s, dark suit, no tie. He stood up when I arrived, smiled politely, and gestured for me to sit. The acquaintance had told him my name was different, something simpler. I used it. He ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. Wine, some kind of grilled fish, small side dishes. He talked about his work in logistics, about a trip to Busan the week before. I nodded, answered when he asked questions. The silences stretched longer than they should have. I noticed how carefully he watched my face when I spoke, how he refilled my glass even when it was still half full. The air in the booth felt warmer than the rest of the room. After the plates were cleared, he leaned back and said the evening could continue upstairs if I was comfortable. The acquaintance had explained it earlier. Some clients preferred that. I hesitated. He waited without pushing. I said yes because the number she had mentioned was already in my head, and because going home empty-handed felt worse in that moment. We took the elevator in silence. The hallway carpet was thick. Inside the room, the curtains were already drawn. He poured more wine from a bottle that was waiting on the table. Conversation got thinner. He asked if I wanted music. I said it was fine either way. The rest of it happened the way those things do when you've already crossed the line in your mind. I stayed focused on the ceiling light and the sound of the air conditioner. When it was over, he went into the bathroom. I got dressed quickly and sat on the edge of the bed. He came out, opened his wallet, and counted the cash onto the nightstand. Exact amount the girl had promised, plus a little extra. He told me to take a taxi and that the front desk wouldn't ask questions. I picked up the money, folded it, and put it in my bag without counting it again. Downstairs, the lobby felt too bright. I walked straight out and found a taxi rank. On the ride home, I stared at the window and kept my hands in my lap. The bills were still in my bag. When the driver stopped near my apartment, I paid him and got out. Standing on the sidewalk, I realized something small had shifted. The night felt longer than it should have, and I already knew I wasn't going to tell anyone what had happened. The money came fast once the agency got involved. The girl who first texted me introduced me to a man who called himself a manager. He had a quiet office in a regular building, nothing flashy. He explained schedules, rates, how the transfers worked. Within a month, the private loan numbers on my mother's papers started shrinking. I watched her shoulders drop a little every time I handed her another envelope. That alone kept me going longer than anything else. I stopped taking the subway. Clients sent cars. Suddenly, I was sitting in the back of black sedans, eating takeout from places I'd only seen in magazines. One night, a man took me to a restaurant where the menu didn't have prices. Another flew me to Jeju for a weekend because he didn't want to eat alone. Business class felt strange the first time. Wide seats, free champagne, people who never looked at the price of anything. I bought a coat that cost more than 3 months of my old salon pay. I told myself it was for work. Then I bought another. The gifts arrived without warning. A watch left on a nightstand. A bag I was told to keep. Earrings that felt too heavy. I started recognizing the same hotels, the same private dining rooms. Conversations drifted into things I wasn't supposed to hear. Land deals, someone who needed a favor from a politician, a company about to collapse. Nobody lowered their voice. They treated me like furniture that could listen. Strange requests became normal. One client only wanted me to sit across from him while he practiced a speech. Another paid just to walk through a department store and tell him which ties looked better. A third asked me to attend a gallery opening and pretend we'd known each other for years. I learned the rules without anyone writing them down. Never ask personal questions. Never look surprised. Never stay longer than you were paid for. I moved into a nicer apartment the agency helped arrange. Better neighborhood, quieter building. My mother thought I'd gotten a promotion at a new salon. My brother still believed the same story. I started answering texts at all hours. Sleep became something I fit in between bookings. The old notebook with my sketches stayed buried in a drawer. I crossed lines I didn't notice until later, accepting a client who made me uncomfortable because the fee covered another chunk of debt. Staying quiet when the manager changed the schedule without asking, telling myself it was temporary, even as the weeks turned into months. There were nights I sat in those expensive rooms and thought, I can't believe this is my life now. Sometimes it felt exciting. Sometimes the silence after a client left felt heavier than any argument I'd ever had at home. Once, in a hotel hallway at 3 a.m, I realized I no longer calculated the subway fare home. I just waited for the next car. That was the quiet moment it hit me. The two lives weren't separate anymore. This one had already become the real one. The agency started scheduling me tighter after the first few months. The manager would text a time and a hotel name, sometimes only an hour ahead. I learned to keep a small bag packed. Clean clothes, makeup, cash. I stopped telling my mother exact plans. If she asked where I was going, I'd say a late shift or a friend's place. The lies came out smoother every time. Clients changed. Some were quiet and polite, paid on time, left me alone after.
Others talked the whole evening about their wives or their kids like I was supposed to care. One man made me sit through 3 hours of him complaining about his business partner while barely looking at me. Another insisted I use a different name every time and correct him if I slipped. I got good at switching stories. By the end of a week, I sometimes couldn't remember which version I'd told whom. I missed my brother's birthday twice. The first time, I sent money and a message. The second time, I just didn't mention it. Old friends from the salon stopped texting after I canceled plans too many times. One of them asked once if everything was okay. I said I was fine, just busy.
That was the last conversation we had. Sleep flipped. Days blurred into nights. I'd come home at 4 or 5 in the morning, close the curtains, and try to rest while the city woke up. Sometimes I'd wake up and not know what day it was until I checked my phone. The expensive hotels stopped feeling special. Same thick carpets, same minibar, same polite staff who never asked questions. I started noticing the emergency exits without meaning to. It became automatic. The manager began adding fees: housing support, clothing allowance, transportation. The numbers never quite matched what I earned. When I asked, he smiled and said it would even out. Refusing certain bookings meant more fees or a warning that my mother might hear something she shouldn't. I stopped refusing. Some nights were just strange. A client who only wanted me to read business reports out loud. Another who paid to walk around a quiet park at midnight and not speak. One who got angry when I didn't laugh at his jokes and then apologized with extra cash. I learned to read faces fast, how long they looked at their phones, whether their hands stayed still. Pretending to listen became easier than actually listening. I deleted messages every night before sleep, carried cash in different places so it wouldn't all be in one bag, memorized fake schedules in case anyone asked. The old fear of debtors calling the apartment faded, replaced by a different kind of pressure that never fully left. Expensive places no longer impressed me. Conversations about normal jobs started to sound distant, like something from a different life. One evening, I sat in a hotel lobby waiting for a car and realized I hadn't thought about the beauty courses in months. The notebook was still in a drawer somewhere. I didn't go looking for it. The thought didn't even bother me the way it used to. That was when I understood how far things had shifted. This wasn't temporary anymore. It was just the way the days went. The booking came through the usual way, a short message with a time and an address outside the city. The manager said it was an overnight, higher rate. I didn't ask questions. I'd stopped asking by then. The car picked me up after dark. The driver barely spoke. We left the main roads and the lights thinned out until it was just highway and dark fields. The place was a quiet hotel, the kind that sits off the main road with a half-empty parking lot. The client was already in the room when I got there. Middle-aged, ordinary-looking, polite at first. He offered a drink. We talked for a while about nothing important. Work, the weather, a trip he'd taken. Nothing felt off yet. I'd been in rooms like this dozens of times. Then the tone shifted. He stopped listening when I spoke. His hands got rougher. When I told him to slow down, he didn't. When I tried to push him back and say stop, he didn't stop. He hit me hard, deliberate, aiming for places that would hurt and keep me quiet. Face, ribs, arms. I remember the sounds of my own breathing getting short. I remember the weight of him and the way the room tilted. At some point, I stopped being able to move much. He got dressed like nothing had happened, took money from his wallet, dropped it on the floor near the bed, and walked out. The door clicked shut. The room went quiet except for the air conditioner. I don't know how long I lay there. Eventually, I got onto my hands and knees and crawled to the bathroom. The mirror showed someone I barely recognized, swollen, cut, one eye almost closed. I sat on the floor until I could breathe steady enough to find my phone. It took about an hour before I could call a taxi and give the address clearly. The driver didn't ask questions when he saw me. Neither did the nurse at the hospital when they checked me in. They stitched my face, wrapped my ribs, 2 of them broken, and told me the blow near my eye had come close. The doctor looked at me for a long moment and didn't say anything extra, just treated what needed treating. I lay in the bed afterward, staring at the ceiling lights. The city outside kept moving like every other night. Cars, voices in the hallway, the usual hospital sounds. That was when it settled in, clear and simple. Next time, I might not make it to the phone. I didn't answer a single number from that life again. Not the manager, not the agency, not anyone who tried to reach me through old contacts. I changed everything and disappeared from them. That night was the last one. I didn't leave clean. The first weeks after the hospital, I just stayed dark. New number, new SIM, no social media, nothing that connected back. The agency tried through old contacts. Messages came through people I barely knew, saying I still owed for the apartment and the clothes, that my mother would hear everything if I didn't settle. I ignored them. Moved to a different district on the other side of Seoul where no one expected me. Slept on a borrowed mattress for a while. Every time the phone buzzed, I felt my chest tighten, even when it was just a spam text. Going back to regular work was harder than I thought. My hands shook the first month at the small salon that hired me. Simple things, mixing a mask, holding a mirror, felt strange after years of living on someone else's schedule. I had nightmares where I couldn't reach the phone. Some mornings, I'd wake up already checking the locks. I lost the few friends who still tried to stay in touch because I couldn't explain the gaps or the scar near my eye without lying. Therapy helped a little, but mostly it just taught me how to sit with the guilt without drowning in it. The shame didn't leave. It just got quieter. Money was tight again for a long time. No more envelopes, no more cars. I learned to budget the way I used to when I was 20. Some nights the old fear came back, that the manager or someone else would show up at the salon or find my mother. It never happened, but the possibility stayed in the back of my mind for years. I stopped trusting people easily. Even kind clients at the salon made me careful. Rebuilding a normal day, waking up, going to work, coming home, cooking something simple, took longer than the leaving itself. I'm 27 now. I work in a quiet beauty place a few subway stops from where I used to live. I live alone. The scar near my eye is still there if you look close. I almost never talk about those years. Some things healed, some didn't. I still catch myself calculating exits in new rooms. I still can't fully forgive the version of me who stayed long after she knew better. I crawled to the phone that night, and that was the last thing I did in that life.